Well, I don't know about you folks, but I need to take a breath. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach and author of the fabulous book, A Life to Die For. I'm also one of the new senior partners at the Wellness Universe and also a co-author of the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. This is episode number 206, and today our topic is the 100-100 relationship. So let me ask you, have you ever been in a one-sided relationship? You know, the kind where you seem to be the one carrying most of the load and doing most of the work to keep the relationship alive? It's not a lot of fun, is it? I mean, I know I've been there, and I'm sure many have. Most people are able and willing to carry the bulk of the load for a period of time when the other person is going through a temporary struggle. But frustration and resentment invariably occur if the imbalance continues unabated for too long. Well, no relationship is a one-way street as far as I'm concerned. At least not if it's going to be a healthy and successful one. Both parties in the relationship must be willing to bring sufficient energy to create a sense of holistic balance. A successful relationship requires teamwork, collaboration, mutual generosity, and regular feedback. What we have learned is that the very best and most fulfilling relationships are the ones where both parties show up completely and authentically all the time. We call these 100-100 relationships because both parties bring 100% of themselves to the table 100% of the time. Well, my guest today is a yoga teacher and love coach who specializes in self-love, relationships, dating, breakups, and being successfully and happily single. She's the CEO of Miss Adventures LLC and a #1 best-selling author who strongly believes in the power of prayer and affirmations to ignite and create the love, health, wealth, success, family, abundance, and prosperity we want in our lives. Her mission is to help empower women on their journey and create a clearer path for guiding them to self-love. So please join me in welcoming the delightful Stephanie Bailey to today's program. Welcome, Stephanie. I'm sorry for all the technical mess ups today, but thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So like I promised you, because we did start a little bit late, I'm going to make sure you get your full hour because, you know, that's what we do. And plus, I'm sure that the people watching want to get as much of you as they can. So thank you for being here. I'm delighted that we're able to make this happen. As you said, we started at 11:11 my time.
Yes, that is good
Which
luck.
apparently is
11's a good time.
Yeah, it's an auspicious number, I guess. All right, so let's see. I always like to start by getting to know my guest a little bit, and obviously, this notion of relationship is important to you, and in particular, the 100-100 relationship. So maybe can you share a little bit about your journey and what happened in your life to make this such an important topic for you?
To be honest, David, I have dated a lot of men in my journey. And through dating the multiple men that I have dated, I realized throughout my relationships that if there's not an equal balance, the relationship just doesn't work out. And in a lot of my relationships, I felt like I was giving, and not receiving what I needed. And this was an encore, this was going like, I would say throughout most of my relationships. One in particular that really like is standing in my mind is the guy that I dated, and his dog passed away. And when his dog passed away, before the dog was actually officially put down because the dog couldn't really move, I was there, I was making dinner for him and his kids, doing everything, even going there, sitting with them, being with them with their dog. I get it. I've lost a fur baby. I totally understand that. It's like very heartbreaking. However, when I went through surgery, he wasn't there. He was not there at all for me. My mom came down. He came over to the house with his kids, was eating the food that my mom made. I mean, it was kind of like a horror story. I'm like, what is happening right now that, I've given to his, family, his kids, himself, and his pet. But then when I really needed him, he was out of sight, out of mind. So Yeah, this is stemmed from all my relationships, but that was probably the one that broke the camel's back where I was like, no more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I understand that, you know, losing a loved one, whether it's a person or, a pet, that can be a very traumatic experience for a lot of people and very painful to deal with. And some people, let's face it, we aren't really very well taught how to deal with our own pain. And so consequently, I can understand that people might kind of they end up acting out in strange ways, and not always to their benefit, and certainly not to the benefit of the people in with whom they're in relationship. So I can resonate with that, but at the same time, I know what it's like to be in your shoes, where you feel like you're carrying the entire load of the relationship, and it just keeps going and going and going. It is like there's no return, there's no give back, and that can be very painful as well. So I totally get it. And now, I noticed when you chose to discuss your a little bit of your story, you were focusing mostly on dating relationships, on relationships with men. So what about other kinds of relationships, like mother child, father child, all those other kinds of or even just business associate relationships? I mean, I think that if we can talk about the quality of relationship, it certainly applies across the board. It's not limited to primary one-on-one kind of relationships.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel this applies to all relationships with my friends in particular. I call them the VIP friends. These are very important friends of mine. I have narrowed it down because, when you're younger, you think you need all of these friends in your life, and then you realize you only have a few you can really count on.
That's
And
right.
so I have a VIP group of friends that I know I can count on and I know I can talk to about anything. And I've had to, unfortunately let go of a lot of friendships because they didn't fit the 100 relationship. I felt like I was constantly giving advice, listening to them, being there for when they needed me, and I wasn't getting the same in return.
Right.
And so yes, I absolutely agree, David. This is something that we can apply into our lives with every aspect and sit down and say, okay, do I need this person in my life in this capacity or at all?
Mm.
Do I need
Mm.
this job in my life in this capacity? Right. I mean, if we really start to look and evaluate, we'll do a lot of internal house cleaning on our own.
Right, right. So I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for a sec. I just want to say thank you to all the people who are here for the live presentation. Thank you for being here. We really would encourage you to participate to the best of your ability by putting your comments or questions into the chat area there on the left side of the screen. And we'll do our best to get to your questions and make sure that we respond to you as we proceed. Um, yeah, I have come to the conclusion that relationship is probably the single most important thing that we have in our lives. I've often meditated on this idea. Well, what would happen if I had no relationships? What would my life be like? And I really honestly cannot imagine what that would be like. I try, you know, if I didn't have other people in my life to relate to, if I didn't have other things in my life to relate to, how would I even know who I was? I would have nothing to compare to. So I think relationships are like really, really important, far more important than we even imagine. And often we are thrust into relationships without any kind of training, but we just simply have to kind of deal with, the people who show up in our lives and the situations that show up. And so what do you think about that idea?
I mean, I feel honestly, if we did not have relationships, we would not only be very lonely people, I also feel like we'd have a hard time connecting with anybody in this world, right? Like I mean, we've seen movies, most of us have, where the person is by themselves for like years and they're talking to themselves and they're doing these crazy things because we are meant to have relationships because every relationship you have, you're learning more about yourself, right? It teaches you more about yourself, what you want, what you don't want, what you need. I mean, it goes to such this big adventure. You think about it throughout your entire life. Every relationship you have, if you look back, good or bad, right? If you're looking back, has helped you grow in some capacity. right? Has made you become stronger, wiser. So if you had nobody, which is such a scary thought, right? If you're just by yourself, I mean, I feel like for me, I'd be walking into walls personally. If I had no relationship, I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Right.
So
Yeah,
relationships are
that's
really
very
important.
interesting. Have you ever read Conversations with God by
I've
Neil
read part
Donald
of
Walsh?
that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I know there's one place and I've read almost all of Neil Donald Walsh's books because they really resonated for me. But I remember there was one little story he included in one of his books where he just said, imagine you're in a room all by yourself. You're just kind of suspended in this room. It's completely, pick a color. It doesn't matter what color it is. It's all one color, everything, the walls, the ceiling, the floor, the whole place. So you can't really tell where the wall begins or the wall ends and the ceiling begins. And there's nothing else in this room. That's it. It's just you. In fact, it's such a unique place that you can't even put your arm out and see your hand. It's very, very weird place. So he asks the question, so who are you in this room? And if the longer you are there in this completely empty place, the more you begin to lose sense of who you really are. And then he says, and then while you're in this room, while you're suspended, all of a sudden a little dot appears on the wall somewhere. You see this dot, and all of a sudden now you are now in relationship with that dot. And now you can say, oh, look at that. It's a dot. But it's a small, is it really small? We don't know. But it's small in relation to how I imagine myself to be. Then maybe a cat shows up and you say, oh, look at this, a furry cat. And what happens is we start comparing ourselves to all the things that are in our environment. Oh, I'm not furry like that. I don't purr like that. I don't make those kinds of noises. So I'm not a cat. I'm not a dot, you see? And what happens is you start subtracting what you are not rather than thinking about what you are. And then what happens is you eventually get into a relationship with a human being, and now you can see someone who looks similar to you, has similar structure, and you can begin to see reflection, and that person is doing the same thing. So you got this really powerful interaction going on that allows you both, in fact, not just two humans, but a human and an animal, for example, both of you to experience aspects of yourself that you wouldn't otherwise be able to experience if not for this other person in your life. That's the beauty of relationships. And it's such a powerful story to me. I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I began to realize just how important every single relationship is, even the ones, as you say, that maybe aren't so pleasant. It was an amazing awakening moment for me.
And I feel like most relationships in general, it's like instead of if we were all put in that situation, right, just to awaken all of us and be like, look, like this is why relationships are in our lives. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen for most people, right? I don't think I don't think we're going to be levitating or anything. But the point is, when we're in these relationships that we're in, we always forget to just say, okay, what am I here to learn? Where am I here to grow? And a lot of times we walk away as the victim and we're like, oh my God, he said, she said, whatever. And we walk away and we don't learn anything. And then we get to another relationship and then we're dealing with the same stuff all over again. And we repeat this cycle until we finally say, okay, wait, there's a learning lesson here. And when you learn it, that's when you find the person that you're meant to be with potentially next or forever, whatever forever looks like for each individual. So I think relationships are amazing.
Exactly. Well, you bring up the word forever. And, frankly, I think every relationship is forever. Even if it only lasts a short while, it's still forever because the interaction that you have with the person, even if it's only like you bump into each other on a, in a shopping, in a grocery store or something like that. You just bump into each other, but have no actual interaction other than that. That still has an impact on your life, and that's forever. So every relation has that potential. And of course, the ones that we choose to be more involved in, the ones that we choose to take the time and the energy and the desire to get to know the other person and to have the other person know us more deeply and more intimately, those kinds of relationships also have a huge impact on us. But we should never minimize or dismiss just the tiny little seemingly meaningless interactions that happen with people, because everything has a reason for happening in our lives.
Have you ever seen Run Lola Run?
I have seen that, but I
Okay, so
can't remember right off the top of my head what it's about. Yeah.
that reminds me of Run Lola Run. So everyone, Run Lola Run is about a woman. She leaves her house. I want to say late. I might have the order wrong, but late, early, on time. And each individual that she bumps into, it shows how her life changes dramatically. And then
Right.
it starts all over again. So versus first she leaves late, shows how her life changes by each person and again on time. It's a powerful story because, like you said, David, every single person, whether we're trying to pull into a parking lot, somebody takes our space, that changes the dynamic of the energy in our life. So
Right.
everything does have a purpose and a reason. And we forget that so often because we're so rushy and so social media that we forget to look around and be like, wait, like maybe I wasn't supposed to have that parking spot. Maybe my car would have gotten hit. Or if you are running late and somebody cuts you off, it's like, well, maybe they just actually saved me from getting into a major car accident. Like we don't know the impact because we don't have a crystal ball. But I do 1000% agree with that. Like every
Yeah.
person
Right.
has an impact. So it's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I have seen it, and like I said, I can't remember the details of it. But now that you've mentioned it, maybe I'll look it up and see if I can watch it again. There's lots of movies like that that have the what's the undercurrent, the subtext that's not really expressed necessarily in the story, but is quite obvious to anybody paying attention. And those are really good stories. Those are the ones that tend to, I think, activate us in powerful ways. So let's just kind of bring back now. We've been talking about this idea of a hundred relationship, which obviously means that all parties in the relationship show up 100% in their authenticity and everything about them 100% of the time. That's what we're shooting for here. So can you imagine one of these innocuous, seemingly insignificant little bumps with somebody if you were showing up 100% in that relationship and the other person was too? That could be pretty amazing, don't you think?
Yeah, I have through my search and unsearch of relationships, right? Because sometimes we're searching, sometimes we're not, and we meet people. It's amazing how when you find somebody, and we're going to say my best friends, we're going to say my sisters, just knowing that we are there for each other in that capacity, it's so fulfilling in our life. And then we start to look around, and it's crazy when we're like, but I'm not getting this from this other person. So why am I in this relationship, friendship, or whatever when it's draining me? But so often we're afraid to let things go, even though we know that they don't serve our lives. But then I challenge everybody, look around at who you are surrounding yourself with. And if you have that person that's 100% and you're 100%, I mean, all things are possible, I feel. When you're not and you're giving 100% and somebody's like, 50 sounds good to me, you're going to be I just feel you're going to be very frustrated and pissed off a lot. I mean, that's from my own experience, I was. So, I mean, maybe
That's
some
right.
people don't care. I feel I was pissed off and frustrated a lot.
Right. Well, and of course, I think part of what we need to do when we enter into a relationship, first we have to enter it consciously. We have to move into it from a place of awareness, knowing what it is that we want to bring to the relationship and knowing what we want to get out of it. So I guess all of us have a list of priorities, if you like, that, it might be just a mental list, but some of us have actually taken the time to write them down and put them on a piece of paper or in some other written form. Uh, so talk a little bit about the importance of establishing your own set of what do we call these, non-negotiable items. How do you go about doing that, and how do you recommend that your relationship partner do the same?
So I'm huge on 5 non-negotiables. That's my thing that I always tell my clients, my friends. I'm like, well, what are your 5 non-negotiables? I can only speak from a woman's perspective because, maybe men make a list. I don't know if they do. I know women are very known for making these extended lists that are like, he needs to be 5'6", he needs to look like that, he needs to have a car. I mean, it's so precise. And what I tell any woman that comes to this big list, I'm like, you are blocking yourself from love. Because at
Right.
the end of the day, if he's 5'6" or 5'3", if he doesn't meet your non-negotiables, it doesn't matter. So non-negotiables are, what are the 5 things that you need for a relationship to work? For instance, if you're Jewish and you really want to be with somebody who's Jewish, you would not be with somebody who wasn't, right? That's really important for you. Or you want to be with somebody that would be willing to convert. If you believe in God and Christ and that is huge in your life, then why would you be with an atheist, right? Just because he's 5'6" and looks good. There are things that make a foundation of a relationship to last. We only know what that is for ourselves. For instance, if you want children and then you're with a man that says, I don't want kids, but you're on your 5 non-negotiables, having children, a family is really important, then why are you with somebody who doesn't fit that? So the
Right.
5 non-negotiables have nothing to do with what that individual looks like. It has to do with the core things that you need: the family, if that's really important; the religion, if that's really important; how that person treats you and talks to you and respects you. Write that down because that's really important. And if you're with somebody that is disrespectful to you and doesn't care, and that's on your 5 non-negotiables, walk away. Because when we create these lists of the 5 non-negotiables only, I don't want to put 10, but five non-negotiables. I mean, they can be 10. I think that's getting a little bit too extensive, but then we know when we're seeing these things, we can say, okay, that's a red flag. This person isn't for me. As great as they look, as beautiful as their car is, as nice as their house is, that doesn't matter because at the end, this relationship's not going to work out.
Right. Yeah, that's a beautifully said and very important, I think. I just want to come back to one point because something just triggered in my mind. Uh, we have the capacity for manipulating each other. This is a pretty natural phenomenon among human beings. And I'm just thinking about a scenario. If one of the partners says, I want kids, and the other partner says, oh, this is a non-negotiable, I can tell. I really want this person in my life. Am I willing to say yes to that non-negotiable in order to have the relationship? And then maybe later let the truth come out that I'm really not interested in having kids. This is a big problem. So I think going in, both partners have to be committed to 100% honesty and truth. If you don't want kids, that's fine. Just let me know. I'm curious.
Right,
But don't tell me you want kids just so you can get in the sack with me,
right.
because I know what's going to happen. Then we'll end up getting married. Then we'll end up having kids, and I'll discover that you really don't want to have kids. And guess what? We're going to end up getting divorced, and that's going to be bad for you and me. It's going to be bad for the kids. This is the thing that we have to be aware of and we have to be thinking about in our minds. So talk a little bit about that. How do you make sure that these non-negotiables are honest and true, and that both parties are willing to say yes or no very clearly in the negotiating phase?
It's the questions you ask in the beginning. So instead of saying, do you want kids? It's easy for a guy to say, like I said, you just said, if he wants to be with you, it's easy for him to just be like, oh, yeah, I want kids. Well, what is if you don't ask a direct question and you ask more questions like, first get to know his family, right? Like, so do you have brothers and sisters? Oh, do they have children? Oh, are you a niece and nephew? Oh, do you like being a niece? Do you like being a uncle to them? I mean, fish around first, right? And then, ladies, honestly, if we're talking about a man, or if we're talking about a man who wants children with a woman and he's not sure, there are baby stores around. Walk in one. You can walk in and just say you're buying a gift for a niece or nephew if you have one. Take them with you. See how they react. A lot of times, you can know how somebody's going to react to something by bringing them in that situation. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. If sports is high on your list, gentlemen, for a woman to love sports, you're going to know if she loves sports or not. If you take her to a sports bar, if you're watching sports all day and she's all in it or she's getting annoyed, I mean, you'll know. Our facades don't last that long. And I
That's
always
right.
say date somebody for like 9 months at least before you make a commitment. And I'm talking about commitment as far as being exclusively in a relationship with that person. After 9 months, whatever facade they're portraying will slowly start to diminish and you get to know who they really are.
Right.
So that's my advice. And then also, like in that 9 months, 6 months in, just be like, hey, what are your non-negotiables? Let's both write ours down and then swap them and see if they even match. Because if they don't match at all, that's also a sign that that person is probably not the right person for you.
Right. Yeah. So it really comes down to communicating, and communicating truthfully and honestly and compassionately with each other. And I think the relationships that are, geared towards romance and family and that sort of thing, they would have one set of non-negotiables for sure. But a relationship that's more business oriented, maybe you're thinking about becoming a partner with somebody and having a business together. It's still going to be a relationship, and it's going to be very much like a marriage in a lot of different ways, even though you presumably won't be engaging in sexual type relationship with this person. So what kinds of non-negotiables do you find coming up in those kinds of conversations?
I would say communication. Is that person a great communicator? Because when you're in business with somebody, you need communication. And I highly believe you need like not delayed communication, but somebody that's going to get back to you right when you text or shortly after. I mean, I get people give you meetings, etc. But it's not something where you're waiting for an answer, waiting for, because that can be very stressful on your business. I also feel like when you're in business with somebody, again, a non-negotiable would be like, okay, what are our roles? And really discussing what that looks like to create a business that's successful. A lot of times in business, you have one person that's more, the back end. A lot of times, one person that's more the front end. Figuring out that roles and being able to say, how are we going to support each other the best, and what does that look like? I mean, everything with 5 non-negotiables, whether it's with family members, friends, a loved one, a business partner, you have to be really clear about what's going to work for you, for your success, whether it's, again, a love success or a business success or a friendship success. You need to know those things. And a lot of times it's a hit or miss. Sometimes you won't even know your non-negotiables until you've actually experienced the things that haven't worked for you. And that's when you can say, wait, that's what I need in my relationships going forward.
Right. Yeah. And so some of the relationships you have in your younger days might be the ones that teach you about these non-negotiables.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't date all these men for no reason.
That's right. Yeah. Well, okay. So I mentioned this idea of manipulation, and that happens. We get into
Yeah.
that. Let's extend this a little bit and talk a little bit about what happens in relationships. Sometimes you have these power struggles. You have these situations where one person is really insistent on having one thing and the other person's not wanting that at all. Even though it was never part of the original discussion, it wasn't part of the list of non-negotiables. What's your recommendation for dealing with those kinds of situations?
I mean, there's a few. One, I am a firm believer in using your voice. I feel, again, because, my main clientele are women, I do feel women tend to hide their voice. They don't want to upset the pot because they're like, oh my gosh, he might leave me. He might get upset. It's a lot of excuses behind it. However, when you're able to use your voice, the right person is going to listen and the right person isn't going to leave you. Secondly, I always believe that you have to compromise. There's got to be compromise in all relationships. It can't just be your way or the highway. So for me and my household with my partner, he loves to watch football all the time, and other sports. He watches a lot of sports. So for me, the compromise is, okay, I live in Denver. I will watch the Broncos with you, not all the time, but I definitely will sit down and watch a few Broncos games. And that's my compromise with them. He's happy with that. His son stays with us full time. He's been living with us full time for over 3 years. So they'll watch football. And sometimes if I'm not doing anything, they're like, hey, will you come watch this game with us? If I'm sitting there trying to get some work done, I'll be like, fine, I can sit downstairs, get my work done, and still have family time. So there's always that compromise that you have to say, okay, I mean, he watches silly like dating shows with me, right? So that's a compromise. So I always believe there's a compromise in it, but then using your voice and being very clear with your boundaries of what works for you and what feels good for you.
Right. Yeah. Have you ever heard of what is it? Nonviolent communication? I think
No.
no. There's a. It was written by a guy, and I might get his name wrong. I think it's Marshall Rosenberg. I think that's his name. It's actually a pretty good book. I mean, he talks about a lot of stuff. Well, there's another fellow I know who wrote a book related to that, but his title was "Don't Be Nice, Be Real," and that's kind of an interesting book too. But both of these books talk about the idea of like compromise is one of those strange situations. It's fine to compromise circumstances and situations and ideas and thoughts, but the moment you compromise yourself, that's when you lose. So at no time should one ever compromise the truth of who you really are in order to satisfy a situation. The other thing is, in every situation, when two people have a conflict about what it is they want to do, there's usually underneath the let's do this kind of thing, there's a deeper desire for something else, which is eventually, if you go deep enough, both of you will discover what it is that you're wanting out of that situation. And you may decide, so just to give an example, I want to have dinner with you and you want to go out to a movie. All right. Now, it's not immediately obvious what the purpose of the connection is, but if we dig down, both of us want to be together and we want to be sharing some time. And we want to just be able to be with each other even if we're not necessarily talking, right? So there's a way of looking at the chosen activity. You can't even see my hands because this stupid background thing. Yeah. Anyway, the chosen activity is really just, that's my preference in the moment. But ultimately, what I really want is connection with you. And if we can both say, well, that's what we both want, then why don't we find some activity that we both like that will allow us to have that connection? It doesn't have to be sexual, but it could be, it could be we just want to have a sit down and conversation, maybe have a drink and talk. I don't know. So that's what the nonviolent communication book is really about, finding the common ground, finding the desire underneath the things that you say. Because it's easier to say, I don't want to go out to dinner, than it is to say, I really want to just spend some intimate quality time with you. A lot of people are afraid of that intimacy. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a communication piece because, touching back to what you said, if you're doing things that aren't you, again, it will show, it will come out. I had a friend that went camping. She hates camping. And then her and her partner at the time got into a fight about it. And when she came back, she's like, yeah, we're fine. I was like, well, you don't even like to go camping. Of course you fought because you did something you do not like to do. Now she doesn't say yes to things she does not like to do. And here's the thing, we're all going to find that person that enjoys the things that we do and will teach us things that we maybe have never experienced. There's that what am I doing? There's that balance, right? In all relationships. And we forget that because we're so afraid of being alone that we hang on to the wrong people. And then our voice gets covered because we say, I don't want to tell this person that I don't like that, or I'm just drinking coffee, even though I can't stand coffee, but because my partner drinks it and I feel like that's going to make them happy. It's like, stop, just like, like be by yourself, learn who you are and what you like so that you can be a better version of you for yourself. And then for the right person who will actually appreciate you for who you are.
Right. Well, you just said something very important, and I mean, how often do we get in relationship and say to ourselves, "I'm going to do this for Stephanie because I know it makes her happy." How often do we do that? And even the truth of the matter is, it probably doesn't really make her happy anyway. You know, it's usually the case that I have this story in my mind that she's happy when she does this, therefore I'm going to enable that to happen. And it might not even be true. But the thing is, what we have to recognize is none of us has the capability to make anybody else feel any particular way. In spite of all the people claiming things to the contrary. Oh, you make me so mad. Oh, you make me feel so good. Whatever it is, that's not true. You just do what you do, and I have my own response or reaction to it. That's it. And not only that, my response and my reaction is my choice too.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an opportunity here to choose to be happy with whatever way our partner is showing up, and to allow ourselves to recognize that sometimes my partner is going to behave in absolutely insane ways. And you know what? That's okay. That's what I love about him or her.
Right, because none of us are perfect. We all have our flaws. You just have to meet somebody that is okay with your flaws. And in a sense, your crazies are okay with each other because we all have a little bit of crazy in us. And that's okay. I mean, I always feel like the word crazy gets put in a bad tense, or in a bad realm. I mean, it's just, I don't like that because we all have stuff. Anybody that comes to the table and says they don't have anything is lying. We all have stuff. And maybe you don't know what your stuff is, but we all have stuff. And then sometimes you're with somebody and all of a sudden your stuff gets brought to the surface even more. And I also call giving it our power away, David. So you said it perfectly when you're like, nobody can make you feel this way except for you. And that is 1000% something I feel wholeheartedly. It's just, we feel how we feel. We also give our power away. So if you're saying this person's making me mad, angry, blah, blah, it's like, well, you're giving them the power to have you feel this way. Right. Because it's your choice how you want to feel in a situation. And yes, we might not feel good in a situation, but again, it's our choice. We can change that around. We don't have to stick with a feeling unless we want to stick with a feeling.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I just noticed a moment ago, Sony, I believe it is. You raised your hand. You are not on a microphone, so you can't actually speak. But if you have access to a keyboard, you can put your question or comment in the chat area, and we'll be happy to respond to that. But that's all I can really say about that at the moment. Yeah. So this whole thing about being happy. Again, I think that's a choice that we all have the capacity to make for ourselves. And so now I think when you and I were first talking about doing this episode, the subject of a happiness meter came up. Now, do you remember when we talked about that?
Yes. Yep. I wrote an article about it.
Oh, good. All right. Well, in that case, I'm not going to say any more. Why don't you tell us about what the happiness meter means for you?
So the happiness meter I created because during every relationship I've been in, when the relationship ends, I've never just jumped into a relationship. I've always taken the time to be single. So there's a point where I was like, okay, I'm really happy in this place in my life. So as I was doing things like going to yoga, hanging out with my friends, watching the TV, cooking, whatever it was that's creating this happiness meter for myself, that I was like, wow, I am happy being successfully, happily single, right? I'm doing my thing, walking my walk, all this stuff. So then the next relationship I ended up getting in, my happiness meter's up. Then all of a sudden I'm getting this relationship. And at first it's meeting my happiness meter. And then slowly and slowly and slowly, my happiness meter is dropping. And when I first started noticing that, I was like, wait, no. I need to be with somebody who is going to meet my happiness meter, not somebody where all of a sudden I'm bringing my happiness meter down because I'm not happy. And then I'm making all these excuses. And so once it's creating like, you know what you feel like when you feel your best. This is a great example, right? Before you get sick, you know how good you feel. Like, I feel really good right now. I'm not sick. But when you get sick, you feel so bad that you don't even remember what it felt like to feel good, right? For a moment. There's a moment you're like, am I ever going to feel good again? And what is it even? I don't even remember what that felt like, right? Because you're so sick, right? It's the same thing. And we forget that. And then we feel good again. We're like, oh, yeah, I feel great again. But then it's like, then we'll put ourselves in a room with sick people. It's like, why are you putting yourself in a room with sick people when you know how crappy you feel when you're sick? So it's just knowing that feeling and saying, if that feeling starts to change for me, and again, we create our change, right? We stay in stuff, we become unhappy, and we choose to stay. So when we're saying to ourselves, I'm not going to do that anymore. I know how I feel. I'm happy. I'm only going to meet and be with people that meet that. And I'm not saying it's not going to come up and down a teeny bit, but to be with somebody where it fully comes down, that's a red flag. And that's, again, how to detect red flags in your life is when your happiness meter starts to come down.
Right. So again, I'm going to go back to what we were talking about before, where each of us has the choice about how happy we want to be and so forth. At the same time, we can put ourselves into environments which maybe are not conducive to having that high level of happiness that we really want to have. There may be chaos going around us. There may be people yelling and screaming and fighting with each other. It's really hard to stay happy in that kind of an environment. So sometimes we have to say, maybe this environment isn't the right environment for me, and I need to distance myself from it somehow. And that might mean saying this relationship is not working, and I need to either get it working or stop it altogether. And that's, those are difficult choices sometimes. All of us have to face them. And I know that, we talked about a moment ago, I'm going to do this because it's going to make Stephanie happy. There's a part of me that is manipulating. You see, that's a shadow behavior. I'm going to do something only because I think it's going to make you happy. Right? Not because it has anything to do with me at all. That's called shadow behavior. And shadows are like, those are the things that crop up everywhere in relationship. And if you haven't done some work on that, they can be devastating to a relationship. So it's really important for us to come into a relationship with some understanding of the well, I don't want to use the word trauma because it isn't always trauma, but let's just say the wounds that may have happened when we were children or young adults or whatever that caused us a lot of pain. And we, maybe learned a lesson that I have to hide this aspect of myself in order to be accepted in the world. And I'm going to hide it from all my relationship partners. Of course, you can't really hide it, but you think you are. It's a great story we make up in our mind. But the point I'm trying to make is that if we haven't done the work on healing those old childhood wounds, and maybe some of them are traumas, then what happens is the behaviors associated with coping with the pain that came with those wounds, those behaviors continue into our adult life and start showing up in sideways manners through different aspects of our relationship. And so you being a normally calm and relaxed person suddenly have an explosion of anger and your partner's looking at you like, what's that all about?
That's why I said wait 9 months at least, because everybody wants to hide their stuff, their experiences, their traumas, all of that. And also, everyone, like when I talk about happiness meter, I don't walk around in daisies and I'm not a cartoon character, right? I'm a yoga instructor. I still get upset and pissed off. However, the happiness I'm talking about is that internal feeling that that has created you. And the best example, like I gave, was being sick, right? Like we know what it feels like to be sick, and we know what it feels like to be healthy. And even though, like, even at my healthiest state, it's not like I feel like, amazingly great every single day, right? There's still gonna be up and down. I'm tired, I have a headache, whatever. But being sick, I mean, that's the part of that relationship you don't want. That cancerous feeling where you're like, I feel horrible, versus, okay, I have a headache today. That means that person's pissing you off. You can get through it, right? I mean, there's different, that's what I'm talking about. The meter is closer to that versus, you're just thinking that life is perfect. And if a relationship isn't perfect, it's not going to work out. That's, to me, I just feel like you're setting yourself up to be alone and single forever.
Right, right.
Relationships take work, 100, 100.
That's right. It's work, but it can be a lot of fun too if you
Yes.
come at it from the right mindset. I think. Um, yeah. This whole idea then. So how do we? So we talked about entering into the relationship with some sense of intention around creating a 100-100 relationship to begin with. But no matter how much intention we put into it, things are going to happen. There might be some external events, there might be some internal events, there might be all kinds of stuff. This is the nature of relationship. On a particular day, you might feel like, or maybe a week or a month or whatever, you're going to start feeling, man, this is not a 100-100 relationship anymore. This is now a 45-40 relationship. How do we get it back? That's the thing.
I mean, every relationship we just said takes work, and I believe it's great work when you're with the right partner. For me, you could ask me today, are you super happy in your relationship? I could be like, oh my gosh, absolutely yes. Next week, you could ask me, and I might be like, I'm good, right? The meter's going to do this. Relationships are like that. However, before you throw in the towel, ask yourself, is this person really worth it? Because so often we want to throw in the towel too soon, too quickly, or tit for tat, like, oh, well, they didn't make the bed today, so I'm not going to make the bed today, type of thing. It's like, just do you. Be the best version of you can be, to be that example of what you want. And if that person doesn't, jump on board with that, then no, they're not the right person. If you're giving what you can, but not, I don't want any, there's not about self-sacrificing yourself for anybody. This is just about saying, I want to display like what I want in this relationship, right? Treat others how you'd want to be treated. And if you're not getting that back, well, then that's when you need to step back and reevaluate and say, is this really the person that I said I wanted? Let me look at my 5 non-negotiables, because chances are they're not meeting your 5 non-negotiables anymore. And
Right.
that's when you can say, this isn't working. I have these 5 non-negotiables for a reason. Clearly, some of them you might have fooled me into because, you're not doing your part. So now I got to
Right.
walk away with my list and hopefully find somebody that will meet my requirements and meet my needs and meet what I need. So, yeah.
Well, I think one good question that all of us can hopefully honestly answer for ourselves is, all right, am I doing my part to create a 100-100 relationship? Am I showing up 100%? Am I giving it my all? If the answer is yes, and it still feels like it's not working, then maybe this is not the right relationship for you. But here's another thing that I believe is also true. On some level, the more I put into it, the more to be my true self, to be my honest, 100% in integrity self in relationship with this particular person, no matter who it might be, the more I do that, the more I set an example for my partner to follow. And even though the relationship may be 100 to 70, let's say, if I hadn't been doing 100, it wouldn't even be that good. It would be 100, it would be 80 to 20 or something. So my example is elevating the relationship on both sides. And if my partner is also doing that, then it's elevating it by magnifying the elevation. You see what I'm saying? So if I can set the example for what 100% looks like, and hopefully my partner will learn from that example and step up, I'm willing to hang in there for a longer period of time if I see that happening. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Because when I think in life, we're all afraid to put, most of us, nobody wants to be vulnerable. Nobody wants to put their heart out there. However, if you don't do those things, then how are you going to know if you're with the right person or if the relationship's going to work? If you have one foot in and one foot out, the relationship is not going to work. If you
Right.
just dive in and say, I'm going to give it everything and let's see, then that's the only way you're going to know. We're never stuck in a relationship ever, ever. And so by giving 100% does not mean that you can't get out if it doesn't work. You get out, so it's one of those things where life is short in a way. It's not short, but it is short in a way that we just don't know how long we're here. And all this worrying that we do and doubts and insecurities that we have, we're wasting it versus just saying, you know what, I'm going to give it all that I can. And if it doesn't, well, guess what? Somebody else will appreciate this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and thank you for mentioning the word appreciation. I mean, that actually brings me to another aspect of our conversation, which is really about, well, first of all, I want to talk about withholds, because what happens is in a relationship, we sometimes have this Pollyanna approach to a relationship. We want it to be perfect. We don't want anything to go bad, and all this stuff is going on. It's kind of a silly game that we play. So as part of that game, if my partner does something that irritates me or bothers me a little bit, I'll probably dismiss it, and I'll say, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. And I won't say anything about it. And then maybe a day later, or maybe even in the same day, my partner will do something else that irritates me. And again, I'll use the same logic. I'll say, it's no big deal. And so what happens is, as you pointed out when we were having this conversation, it's no big deal until it's a big deal.
Big deal.
Yeah. And the thing is, if I could have had the courage to simply share what I was feeling in that very first instance, instead of just dismissing it as not important, no big deal, what I could have done was I could have been a little more vulnerable. I could have said to my partner, I have this thing that's coming up for me, and I'd like to share it with you. Are you okay to hear it? And if my partner is okay to hear it, then I explain. Yeah, when you left your nylons on the back of the couch, it reminded me of a time when I was 5 years old. My mom just really dumped all over me for leaving my socks on the floor. It just really was painful for me to have that experience. And I guess just seeing those nylons there just triggered that memory. And I just noticed that happening for me. This has nothing to do with you. I'm not asking you to change anything. I'm just telling you what happened. And I want to share with you everything that's true about me, because I want to stay in connection with you. And you can look at it, and you can receive that withhold. And all you have to do is say, thank you for sharing. And then you can say, would you like a response? And I then answer, no, I just wanted to get that off my chest. Can I just, let's let some time pass, and then maybe later, if you want to come back, we can have a conversation, because I'm not asking you to change anything. I'm just sharing you my truth. So it's a powerful form of communication. It may seem really stupid when you first talk about it, but the point of it is, if I don't do that, if I don't share with you, if I put in my mind it's no big deal, what I am effectively doing is I'm putting a little brick between you and me. And if I do that enough times, what happens is that brick grows into a wall. I'm effectively creating a wall by refusing to share the little bits and pieces that are bugging me. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, when I share it, when it's only a tiny little brick, it's really easy. But what happens is, when it grows into a wall, well, then one day you forget to, I don't know, clean a dish. And I just have this explosion, and things start flying, and you're wondering, what the hell is going on? So that's what I'm talking about. So the withhold eventually grows and grows and grows. And that's why it's important, I think, to share those at the earliest possible opportunity. Sorry, I talked way too long there, but.
No, but I love it, because, when you just said not do the dishes, I mean, I was in my 20s and I was 28, and I was not telling my boyfriend at the time things that were just irritating me. And I remember at a restaurant, and He's like, "Oh, can you pass the salt?" And I just went ballistic in the restaurant and I just went off on him. And it's true because it's like, why didn't I speak up? Why didn't I say something? And it was because I was young and I was just like too afraid to say something because I was like, if I say it, he's going to get mad. If he gets mad, he's going to leave. And
Right.
I have abandonment issues. And so those abandonment issues were coming up. I've dealt with them, but like back then they were still on. And I didn't realize where my emotions were coming from. And now I have my self love that I've developed within myself. I'm aware. And that's why I'm like, just speak your truth. And when you speak your truth, even if you don't have the capability of doing it like you, David, to that degree, it's like at least come from a place of I feel versus a place of you pointing. Nobody's going to hear that. And nobody wants to hear, oh, you always do this. You never do that.
Right.
If somebody never and always, you wouldn't be with them. Right?
Right.
Like you just wouldn't be. So really choosing your words wisely. And even if you have to take a moment and call your sister like I do all the time and say, hey, let me like powwow with this with you because I need to get a better perspective. So I come in at a more loving place. So you can figure out what works for you. But yes, don't wait too long. Use your voice. And a lot of things like, you said, David, if it's a small little like nick in the brick, right? A tiny little one, it's fixable. But if we wait and wait and wait and it becomes huge, then yeah, the person's going to be looking at you like, what is happening? Like, I don't even know. It's all surface stuff, right? That'll come
Right.
up, and it won't even be like what you really were upset with or the emotions that were behind it.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
So
Well, and there's something else here. I like what you said. Make it about you. I statements.
mhm.
I feel, but be careful because people sometimes say things like, I feel like you're not listening. Well, you can throw away I feel like and say you're not listening, and that's
Right.
exactly what you're saying,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's still just a thought, it's still just a judgment about the other person. So, if you have a judgment about the other person, be honest about it.
Mhm.
You can say something like this. This is the way I would say it. I'm feeling very frustrated right now. I'm noticing some anger coming up, and the story I'm making up in my head, and that's what it is, by the way. The story I'm making up in my head is that you're not listening to me. The story I'm making up in my head, the hallucination I have in my mind is that you really don't care what I have to say. See, when I tell you that I have this as a story and as a hallucination, it's not quite the same as when I just dive at you and attack you and say, you don't listen, you don't care what I say. It's very different. If I can own it as my judgment, as my story, as my interpretation of a situation, I can tone down the energy and make it easier for you to hear what I'm saying. And then when I say that and I own it, I can also say to you, I recognize that this is just a story in my head. And I also recognize that this comes from that time when I was a kid and blah, blah, blah happened. And now you can hear me and you can feel more connected to me because I'm being authentic and vulnerable to you. Do you see? That is the beauty of learning how to communicate from a real true heart space.
Mhm.
Wow, this is
And the
going way
right
deeper than I
person
thought we were going to go. Thank you.
and
This
the
is awesome.
right person, right, will connect with you and respect you. The right person is not going to make you feel bad about you sharing and trying to communicate how you feel. Because and that's another thing. It's like we're afraid to communicate because we're like, well, I did once and they just went off on me. It's like, well, is that the right person then? Because that to me is a sign that that's not your person, right? Especially if they're doing
Right.
it more than once. I mean, I get we all, when you get into a relationship, it's new, you're learning about each other, you're gonna make mistakes, it's gonna happen. But it's when you
Right.
come back and say, sorry, David, I didn't mean to explode on you the way I did. Let me come back, let me apologize versus, oh, well, just deal with it. There's a difference, right?
That's
Like
right.
there's a difference.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other thing that I want to say, I mean, okay, so I talked quite a bit about withholds and the importance of sharing those. But the beauty that I want people to understand here is if you can learn to do that, what you're doing is you're opening yourself up and being vulnerable with your partner. And that creates intimacy. And when you are willing to do that, all of a sudden, you'll begin to see your partner in a whole new way, and you'll begin to appreciate your partner so much more. And that is the beauty. If you're harboring these little withholds in your mind, then what's the likelihood you're going to be able to come out and say, you know what I really appreciate about you? It's going to be harder for you to do that. But when you let go of those, all of a sudden you begin to see this person for the magnificent divine being he or she is. And you get to express, you know, I really appreciate just the way you stand in presence whenever I have to share a withhold with you. I really love that about you. Thank you for that.
Yes.
How hard is that?
Yes. It shouldn't be, but it can be. And that's again, if without doing that, we're not going to have that 100-100 relationship, right? Because being vulnerable is one of the biggest things. Communication, being vulnerable, you know, having that support within each other. I mean, the list goes on, but yeah, you have to be able to honestly just embrace and say, yeah, this is scary, but love is scary in a great way. Relationships are scary in a great way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even like using the word scary. But I get where you're coming from. I think that, you know, vulnerability is actually something that we all love to do. It's just that most people that we've ever been vulnerable to have taken advantage of it. And so we have learned not to be vulnerable. We've learned to be defensive. We've learned to hold ourselves back. When you have the right partner in any kind of relationship, vulnerability becomes just a part of the relationship. And it's a beautiful thing when that happens. It really is. And ultimately, the most beautiful relationships are the ones that have the most vulnerability expressed across the partnership.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I mean, for me, it took a lot to break down my shell and be vulnerable to the degree I am with my partner today. But
Right.
it's been worth it every step of the way. But he also showed me early on he was not a leaver, right? He was not somebody, if I said something, he was going to walk out the door. I mean, the most he ever did was literally walk out the door and stand there and then turn around and come back. Like he's never left ever. And
Yeah.
that's a sign. I mean, I think it's so easy to just want to walk away or run away or whatever you want to do, close the doors, be done. But it takes more to be vulnerable and say, hey, let me just see if this is going to work. Right. I
Right.
mean, a lot of times we have to go through some heartbreaks before we find the right person in any capacity. That's even jobs. You go through a lot of people go through jobs and they walk away and they're heartbroken or upset because it didn't work out. And then they find the best job ever. So
That's
it
right.
takes some times, you know, to go through
That's
before you
right.
find the right one.
Yeah. Wow, Stephanie, we've been going for over an hour here. It's been a great conversation. I would like to just give you a chance to say a couple of words, sentences, whatever you want to say, just to kind of help close us out.
Um, the main thing is 100-100 relationships are about being vulnerable, trusting in yourself in the process, making sure that when you have your 5 non-negotiable lists, you're really being true to yourself, being open to yourself, and you know, being able to use your words and not being afraid. Obviously, when you use your words, do it in a loving manner as much as you can. It's not always going to come out and be forgiving for yourself. I feel like forgiveness is the biggest key as well.
Yeah.
And just and trust in the process and trust your person, and you know, be that person you'd want, you know, like that famous Gandhi saying. I think it's Gandhi, right?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, that's my biggest, that would be my biggest, you know, takeaway from all of this.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here, Stephanie. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation. I love the back and forth, and just, you know, we seem to be on the same wavelength for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to thank you all for being here, and those of you who were on the live presentation, those watching the recording. And I want to remind everybody that you can catch the recordings of this and every other show that I've done on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. Remember, relationships are constant work, but they're totally worth the effort when both partners are bringing 100% authenticity 100% of the time. When this happens, there's a powerful mutual growth, and you both tend to bring out the very best in each other. So this is something that I think we could all fall in love with, and I encourage you all to work towards making your relationships 100. I'm going to invite everybody to remember to practice the Life Mastery mantra every single day. It goes like this: I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. I'll see you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.
Bye.